That which adepts have distinguished as the great work is not only the transmutation of metals but also and above all the universal medicine, that is to say, the remedy for all ills, including death itself. Now, the process which produces the universal medicine is the moral regeneration of man. It is that second birth alluded to by our Savior in his discourse to Nicodemus, a doctor of the law. Nicodemus did not understand, and Jesus said, "Are you a master in Israel and know not these things?" as if intending to intimate that they belonged to the fundamental principles of religious science, of which no professor could dare to be ignorant. The great mystery of life and its ordeals is represented in the celestial sphere and in the annual succession of the seasons. The four aspects of the Sphinx correspond to these seasons and to the four elements. The symbolical figures on the shield of Achilles, according to the description of Homer, are analogous in their meaning to the 12 labors of Hercules. Like Hercules, Achilles must die, after having conquered the elements and even done battle with the gods. Hercules, on his part, triumphant over all the vices, represented by the monsters whom he fought, succumbs for a moment to love, the most dangerous of all. But he tears from his body the burning tunic of Deianira, though the flesh comes with it from the bones. He leaves her guilty and vanquished, to die on his own part, but as one liberated and immortal. Every thinking man is an Oedipus called to solve the enigma of the Sphinx or, this failing, to die. Every initiate must become a Hercules, who, achieving the cycle of a great year of toil, shall, by sacrifices of heart and life, deserve the glory of apotheosis. Orpheus is not king of the lyre and of sacrifices till he has successively won and has learned how to lose Eurydice. Omphale and Deianira are jealous of Hercules. One would debase him, the other yields to the counsels of an abandoned rival, and so is induced to poison him who has emancipated the world. But in the act she cures him of a far more fatal poison, which is her own unworthy love. The flame of the pyre purifies his too susceptible heart. He perishes in all his vigor and is seated victorious close to the throne of Jupiter. So also Jacob was not appointed the great patriarch of Israel till he had wrestled with an angel through the length of an entire night. Ordeal is the great word of life, and life itself is a serpent which brings forth and devours unceasingly. We must escape from its folds, we must set our foot upon its head. Hermes duplicated the serpent, setting it against itself, and in an eternal equilibrium, he converted it into the talisman of his power, into the glory of his caduceus. The great ordeals of Memphis and Eleusis were designed to form kings and priests by entrusting science to strong and valiant men. The price of admission to such tests was the surrender of body, soul and life into the hands of the priesthood. The candidate descended thereafter through dark subterranean regions, wherein he traversed successively among flaming pyres, passed through deep and rapid floods, over bridges thrown across abysses, holding in his hand a lamp which must not be extinguished. He who trembled, he whom fear overcame never returned to the light, but he who surmounted every obstacle intrepidly was received among the Mystae, which meant initiation into the lesser mysteries. He had yet to vindicate his fidelity and silence. It was only at the end of several years that he became an epopt, being a title equivalent to that of adept. Philosophy, in competition with the priesthood, imitated these practices, and put its disciples to the proof. Pythagoras exacted silence and abstinence for 5 years. Plato opened his schools to none but geometricians and those skilled in music. Furthermore, he reserved part of his instruction to initiates, so that his philosophy had its mysteries. He attributed the creation of the world to demons and represented man as the progenitor of all animals. But the demons of Plato signify the Elohim of Moses, being those powers by the combination and harmony of which the supreme principle created. When he represents beasts as begotten by humanity, he means that they are the analysis of that living form, the synthesis of which is man. It was Plato who first proclaimed the divinity of the Word, and he appeared to foresee the approaching incarnation of this creative Word on earth. He proclaimed the sufferings and execution of the perfect just man, condemned by the iniquity of the world. This sublime philosophy of the Word is part of the pure Kabbalah, whence Plato was in no wise its inventor. He makes no secret of this, and he proclaims that in any science only that must be received which is in harmony with eternal truths and with the oracles of God. Dacier, from whom this quotation comes, adds that, by these eternal truths Plato signified an ancient tradition which he supposes primeval humanity to have received from God and transmitted to later generations. It would be impossible to speak more clearly without actually naming the Kabbalah. It is definition instead of name. In a sense, it is something more precise than the name itself. Plato says otherwise, that the root matter of this great knowledge is not to be found in books. We must seek in ourselves by means of deep meditation, discovering the sacred fire in its proper source. This is why I have written nothing concerning these revelations and shall never even speak about them. Whosoever shall undertake to popularize them will find the attempt futile, for, except in the case of a very small number of men who have been endowed with understanding from God to discern these heavenly truths within themselves, it will render them contemptible to some, while filling others with vain and rash self-confidence, as if they were depositaries of marvels which they do not understand all the same. To the younger Dionysius he wrote, I must bear witness to Archidemus concerning that which is far more precious, more divine by far, and that which you desire earnestly to know, having sent him to me expressly. He gives me to understand that in your view I have not explained to you sufficiently what I hold as to the nature of the first principle. I can only write in enigmas, so that if my letter be intercepted on land or water, he who may read it shall understand nothing. All things encompass their king, from whom they draw their being, he being the source of all good things. Second for those which are second and third for those which are third. These few words are a complete summary of Sephirotic theology. The king is Ensif, supreme and absolute being. All radiates from this center, which center is everywhere, but we regard it after three especial manners and in three distinct spheres. In the divine world, which is that of the first cause, the king is one and first. In the world of science, which is that of secondary causes, the influence of the first principle is felt, but is conceived only as first of the said causes. Therein the king manifests by the duad, which is the passive creating principle. Finally, in the third world, which is that of forms, he is revealed as perfect form, the incarnate word, supreme goodness and beauty, created perfection. The king is therefore, at one and the same time, the first, second and third, seeing that he is all in all, center and cause of all. Let us be silent on the genius of Plato, recognizing only the exact knowledge of the initiate. Let it therefore be said no longer that our great apostle St. John borrowed from the philosophy of Plato the proemium of his gospel. It is Plato, on the contrary, who drew from the same sources as St. John. But he had not received that spirit which makes alive. The philosophy of him who expounded the greatest of human revelations might aspire towards the Word made man, but the gospel alone could give that Word to the world. The Kabbalah taught by Plato to the Greeks assumed at a later period the name of theosophy and ended by embracing the whole of magical doctrine. It is to this sum total of secret doctrine that all discoveries of research gravitated successively. The ambition was to pass from theory to practice and to find the realization of words in works. The dangerous experiences of divination taught science how it might dispense with the priesthood. The sanctuary was betrayed, and men who had no mission dared to make the gods speak. It is for this reason that Thurgi shared in the anathemas pronounced against black magic and was suspected of imitating its crimes because it could not exculpate itself from a share in its impiety. The veil of Isis is not lifted with impunity, and curiosity blasphemes faith when divine things are concerned. Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed, says the great master. The experiments of Thurgi and necromancy are always fatal for those who are abandoned to their practice. To set foot upon the threshold of the other world spells death, and it follows often in a strange and terrible manner. Vertigo supervenes, catalepsy and madness finish the work. It is unquestionable that in the presence of certain persons a disturbance takes place in the air. Wainscots split, doors shake and creak. Fantastic signs and even stains, as of blood, seem to impress themselves on virgin parchment or on linen. The nature of these signatures is always the same and they are classified by experts under the name of diabolical writings. The mere sight of such characters sends sufferers from magnetic hysteria into convulsions or ecstasy. They believe that they behold spirits, and Satan, or the genius of error, is transfigured for them into an angel of light. The pretended spirits require, as the condition of their manifestation, some kind of contact between the sexes, the putting of hand in hand, foot to foot, breathing face to face and even immodest embraces. Devotees are besotted by this kind of intoxication. They think that they are elected by God, that they are interpreters of heaven, and they regard obedience to the hierarchy in the light of fanaticism. They are the successors of the Indian race of Cain, victims of hashish and fakirs. They profit by no warnings, and they perish by their own act and will. To restore sufferers of this kind, the Greek priests resorted to a species of homeopathy. They terrified the patients by exaggerating the disease itself, and for this purpose they put them to sleep in the cave of Trophonius. The preparation for this experience was by fastings, lustrations and vigils. The patients were then taken down into the vault and shut up in total darkness. Intoxicating gases, like those in the Grotto of the Dog near Naples, filled the cavern, and the visionary was overcome speedily. Incipient asphyxia induced frightful dreams, from which the victim was rescued in time and carried forth palpitating all over, pale and with hair on end. In this condition he or she was seated on a tripod and prophetic utterances preceded complete awakening. Experiences of this sort so distracted the nervous system that their subjects never recalled them without trembling and in future did not dare to mention evocations or phantoms. Some of them never smiled again or felt the impulse of gaiety. The general impression was so melancholy that it passed into a proverb. And it was said of anyone who did not unbend, "He has slept in the cave of Trophonius." For the remnants of science and the recovery of its mysteries we must have recourse to the religious symbolism of antiquity rather than to the works of its philosophers. The priests of Egypt were better acquainted than ourselves with the laws of motion and of life. They could temper or promote action by reaction, and they foresaw without difficulty the realization of effects the cause of which they had postulated. The pillars of Seth, Hermes, Solomon, Hercules symbolized in magical traditions this universal law of equilibrium, while the science of equilibrium led the initiates to that of universal gravitation about centers of life, heat and light. So in the Egyptian sacred calendars, where it is known that each month was placed under the protection of 3 decani or genii of 10 days, the first decanate in the sign of Leo is represented by a human head with 7 rays. The body has a Scorpio tail and the sign of Sagittarius is under the chin. Beneath the head is the name of Yao, and the figure was called Nubis, an Egyptian word which signifies gold and light. Thales and Pythagoras learned in the Egyptian sanctuaries that the earth gravitated round the sun, but they did not seek to publish the fact generally because it would have involved the revelation of a great temple secret, being the dual law of attraction and radiation, of fixity and movement, which is the principle of creation and the unfailing cause of life. So also the Christian writer Lactantius, who had heard of this magical tradition, but as an effect in the absence of a cause, scoffed loudly at the urgical dreamers who believed in the motion of the earth and in antipodes, the result of which would be the fact that we walked on our heads with the feet upward, though our heads appeared to be erect. Furthermore, as he added, with the logic of children, in such case we should infallibly fall head downwards through the heaven below us. So philosophers reasoned, while priests, without answering or even smiling at their blunders, continued to write in creative hieroglyphics concerning all dogmas, all forms of poetry and all secrets of truth. In their allegorical description of Hades, the Greek hierophants concealed the palmarous secrets of magic. We find 4 rivers therein, even as in the earthly paradise, plus a 5th, which wounds 7 times round the others. There was a river of sorrows and silence, called Cocytus. There was a river of forgetfulness, or Lethe. And then there was a swift and irresistible river which carried all before it, flowing in an opposite course to yet another river of fire. The 2 last were named Acheron and Phlegethon, one being the negative and one the positive fluid, flowing eternally each in each. The black and icy waters of Acheron smoked with the warmth of Phlegethon, while the liquid flames of the latter were covered with thick vapors by the former. Larvae and lemures, shadowy images of bodies which have lived and of those which have yet to come, issued from these vapors by myriads. But whether they drank or not from the flood of sorrows, all desired the waters of oblivion, to bring them youth and peace. The wise alone do not seek to forget, for memory is their reward already. So also they only are truly deathless, since they only are conscious of their immortality. The tortures of Tenerus are truly divine pictures of the vices and their eternal chastisement. The greed of Tantalus, the ambition of Sisyphus, will never be expiated, since they can never be satisfied. Tantalus is athirst in the water. Sisyphus rolls a stone towards the top of a mountain, hoping to take his seat thereon, but it falls back continually and drags him down into the abyss. Ixion, unbridled in license, would have violated the Queen of Heaven and was scourged by infernal furies. He did not consummate his crime, for he embraced only a phantom. The phantom may have condescended in appearance to his love and may have ministered to his passion, but when he disowned duty, when his satisfaction was at the price of sacrilege, that which he thought was love proved hatred in a mask of flowers. It is not from beyond the tomb, it is rather in life itself that we must seek the mysteries of death. Salvation or condemnation begin here below, and this earth has also its heaven and hell. Virtue is ever rewarded, vice is ever punished. If the wealth of the wicked incline us at times to think that they enjoy impunity, that instrument of good and evil seeming to be given them by chance, there is woe notwithstanding to the unjust. They may possess the key of gold, but for them it opens only the gate of the tomb and hell. All true initiates have recognized the immense value of toil and suffering. A German poet tells us that sorrow is the dog of that unknown shepherd which leads the flock of humanity. Learn how to suffer and learn also to die. Such are the gymnastics of eternity and such is the immortal novitiate. This is the moral lesson of Dante's Divine Comedy, and it was outlined in the allegorical table of Cebes, which belongs to the time of Plato. An account of it has been preserved and many painters of the Middle Ages reconstructed the picture therefrom. It is at once a philosophical and magical monument, a perfect moral synthesis, and moreover the most audacious demonstration ever attempted of that great arcanum or secret, the revelation of which must subvert heaven and earth. Our readers will unquestionably expect us to furnish its explanation, but he who has solved this enigma knows that it is inexplicable by its nature and is a sentence of death to those who take it by surprise, even as to those who reveal it. This secret is the royalty of the sage and the crown of that initiate who is represented coming down as a victor from the Mount of Ordeal in the beautiful allegory of Cebes. The great arcanum has made him master of gold and light, which fundamentally are one thing. He has solved the quadrature of the circle, he directs perpetual motion, and he possesses the philosophical stone. Those who are adepts will understand me. There is neither interruption in the process of nature nor a blank space in its work. The harmonies of heaven are in correspondence with those of earth, and eternal life fulfills its evolutions in accordance with the same laws which rule in the life of a day. The Bible says that God disposes all things according to weight, number and measure, and this luminous doctrine was also that of Plato. In the Phaedon he represents Socrates as discoursing on the destinies of the soul in a manner which is quite in conformity with Kabbalistical traditions. Spirits purified by trial are emancipated from the laws of weight, and they soar above the atmosphere of tears. Others grovel in darkness and are those who manifest to the weak or criminal. All who are liberated from the miseries of material life come back no more to contemplate its crimes or share its errors. Once is truly enough. The care taken by the ancients over the burial of the dead protested strongly against necromancy, and those who disturbed the sleep of the grave were always regarded as impious. To call back the dead would condemn them to a second death, and the dread of earnest people, belonging to old religions, lest they should remain without burial after death, was in view of the possibility that the corpse might be profaned by striges and used in witchcraft. After death the soul belongs to God and the body to the common mother, which is earth. Woe to those who dared to invade these asylums. When the sanctuary of the tomb was disturbed, the ancients offered sacrifices to the angry manes, and a holy thought lay at the root of this practice. As a fact, were it permitted anyone to attract, by means of conjurations, the souls floating in darkness but aspiring towards the light, such a person would be begetting retrograde and posthumous children, whom he must nourish with his own blood and with his own soul. Necromancers are makers of vampires, and they deserve no pity if they die devoured by the dead.